Under the dim dawn of April 13, 1990, Nathan Nesmith clung to the wreckage of a sinking fishing boat, his body trembling from cold and exhaustion. Around him, the endless ocean swallowed every sound, leaving only the crash of waves and his faint breaths. He had swum for 11 hours, covering 3 miles of icy water, to reach this point, a dying vessel where his last hope was fading. But then, as he looked up, a strange column of smoke rose on the horizon. A massive freighter emerged from the mist, moving slowly toward where he had left his brother Billy Joe and 2 others. Nathan held his breath, his heart pounding. He'll be saved, he thought. But the ship never approached him. It vanished as if it had never existed. And the haunting question remains, was that ship real or a mirage of a man on the brink of death? This is a story not just of a maritime disappearance, but of a mystery that left a family, a community, and investigators questioning what truly happened in the vast ocean off Georgia's coast. It's about Nathan Nesmith, who survived a fateful trip, and Billy Joe, the brother he loved more than anything, who vanished with 2 others, leaving behind strange clues and unanswered questions. We'll explore the waters off Georgia, where a sinking ship sparked a chilling chain of events, from mysterious phone calls to a freighter no one could prove existed. And along the way, I'll share my own thoughts on what might have happened and why this story still haunts us over 30 years later. The context. In April 1990, the waters off Georgia were no place for the faint-hearted. This was a harsh world where waves could swallow a small boat and water cold enough to induce hypothermia in hours. Georgia, a southern state with quiet coastal towns, was steeped in a fishing culture where families like the Nesmiths were shaped by the sea. Fishing was a tradition, a legacy passed from father to son, filled with tales of triumph and tragedy. But here, amid the waves and wind, there were also beliefs in omens, ghost ships gliding through fog, and lost souls never finding their way home. This blend of reality and mystique sets the stage for our story. Enter Nathan Nesmith, a 31-year-old giant, over 250 pounds and taller than 6 feet. He was strong, but his heart was soft, especially for his family. Nathan wasn't a professional fisherman. Unlike his brother, he'd chosen a different path, only occasionally venturing to sea. He wasn't handy with machinery, feeling out of place in the world of fishermen. But Nathan was loyal. He adored and admired Billy Joe, his younger brother, a seasoned captain, and the pride of the Nesmith family. Billy Joe was the embodiment of fishing. Likely weathered by sun and sea, with sharp eyes, always scanning the horizon, he was the leader, renting the boat for a 7-day trip to haul in a big catch. He carried the pressure of upholding the family legacy. With them were Billy Joe's nephew and a friend, young men, likely eager but inexperienced, caught in a nightmare no one foresaw. This trip was never meant to be ordinary. Nathan wasn't supposed to be there. Joining only to help Billy Joe when 2 fishermen backed out. Their brotherly bond, Nathan's devotion to Billy Joe, was the heart of the story, a tie both beautiful and tragic. But before we dive into what happened on that doomed boat, consider this. What would drive a man to swim 3 miles through icy waters with near 0 odds of survival? And what would keep a family hoping even when every clue leads to a dead end? Initial theories. Maybe Billy Joe and the others drowned, and the freighter was Nathan's hallucination. Or perhaps they were rescued by a secret ship that didn't report it. Or strangers still, could a supernatural force have intervened? I'm not sure. But I think that freighter wasn't just a mirage. Something was out there. A secret the ocean hides, and the clues from the hiss of a leaking raft to Spanish-speaking calls are keys to the truth. To understand why Nathan was alone on that wreck and why his family still awaits a miracle, we must go back to the moment their boat began to sink, when everything went worse than anyone could imagine. When Nathan Nesmith pushed the throttle of the fishing boat in the pre-dawn darkness of April 12, 1990, he expected the engine to roar, propelling them faster through the waves off Georgia. Instead, a feeble groan answered as if the boat were exhaling its last breath. The engine sputtered, moving at half speed, and a chill of dread hit Nathan. He wasn't seasoned like Billy Joe, but he knew this wasn't minor. The ocean around them was pitch black, no lights, no other ships, just waves crashing like whispered threats. In that moment, a chain of horrifying events began thrusting the four men aboard into a nightmare no one could foresee. The trip, a 7-day fishing venture, was meant to showcase Billy Joe's skill. Nathan joined to help when two professionals dropped out alongside Billy Joe's nephew and a friend, likely young, eager, but green. The rented boat, old but supposedly reliable, turned into a floating coffin hours after leaving port. Around 4 a.m., Nathan at the helm felt panic as the throttle failed. He left the wheel, found Billy Joe napping on deck, and said, "Billy, something's wrong with the engine." His voice mixed with embarrassment. Nathan knew he couldn't fix it, relying on his brother's expertise. Billy Joe, unfazed, said, "All right, let me check," and they went to the engine room. But when Billy Joe opened the hatch, thick black smoke poured out, the stench of burning oil choking them. "Damn it," Billy Joe muttered, his voice trembling with frustration and fear. This wasn't a small fix. The engine was dying unrepairable at sea. Nathan felt useless, his size no match for his lack of mechanical skill. Billy Joe ordered him to wake the others. Nathan rushed below, stopping dead seawater, icy and black, flooded the hallway, ankle deep. "Get up, the boat's sinking," he yelled, his voice echoing. The nephew and friend scrambled up, eyes wide with panic, staring at the rising water. Nathan ran back to Billy Joe, shouting, "Water's pouring in. We're going down. Billy Joe." Pale barked, "Grab buckets, start bailing. I'll call for help." He grabbed the radio, screaming, "Mayday, mayday, mayday. We're sinking off Georgia," but only silence answered. The ocean mocked them, keeping its secrets, wearing life vests. Nathan and the others bailed frantically, sweat mixing with seawater, but the flood outpaced them. The sound of rushing water like mocking laughter filled the air. Then the lights flickered and died, plunging them into darkness. The engine stopped and silence fell, broken only by the water's roar. Billy Joe's mayday calls ceased. The radio was dead. Nathan felt despair seep into his bones. No one heard their cries. They were alone. With no choice, they rushed to the main deck, inflated a life raft, and threw it overboard, grabbing food and water before jumping in. As the boat sank, its bow rising in farewell, they clung together, hoping the raft would hold until rescue. But 30 minutes later, a deadly hiss sounded a leak. Nathan searched desperately, finding a small, unpatchable hole. The raft, their lifeline, deflated, leaving them floating in freezing water, held up only by life vests. Wreckage floated by, and they grabbed a large wooden piece, buoyant but too small for all four. They took turns, one resting, while others shivered in the cold, knowing hypothermia was imminent. Nathan looked at Billy Joe, his brother's face gaunt but resolute. His heart ached. He couldn't let Billy Joe die. Then Nathan made a choice no one could forget. His size took up too much space. Without him, the others could stay on the wood, delaying hypothermia. He turned to Billy Joe, calm but resolute. "I'm swimming to the wreck," he said. "I'll find another piece and we'll be fine." The wreck, a faint shadow on the horizon, was 3 miles away, a suicidal distance. Billy Joe protested, voice breaking. "No, Nathan, you can't. You'll die." The others begged, but Nathan was set. He looked at Billy Joe, eyes shining with love. "I love you," he said, and swam each stroke, desperate toward the sinking wreck. Nathan's act was heroic, a testament to brotherly love, but it raised questions. Why did the boat sink? Was it just an accident? And the freighter Nathan later saw, could it hold the key to Billy Joe's fate? Theories: a tragic accident, a secret rescue, a kidnapping, or something supernatural. I think the freighter wasn't a hallucination. Perhaps an illegal vessel smuggling or fishing explains its absence from records. But why not save Nathan? Nathan survived, clinging to the wreck for 3 days. But the freighter, and what followed, opened a new mystery, keeping the Nesmiths hopeful, wondering is the truth out there among the waves? After 11 hours swimming through icy waters, Nathan Nesmith reached the sinking boat's wreckage, his trembling hands gripping debris to avoid being swept away. That night, April 12th, 1990, he lay curled on the exposed bow, tied with rope, unable to sleep. Each wave reminded him the ship could sink, dragging him down. But at dawn, on April 13th, Nathan saw something that jolted his heart, a thin column of smoke on the horizon, and a massive freighter emerging, moving toward where he'd left Billy Joe and the others. "They'll be saved," he whispered, voice hoarse with thirst and hope. But the ship, like a phantom, never neared him. It circled, then vanished, leaving Nathan with a haunting question. What did he see? And if the ship was real, what did it do with his brother Nathan's story doesn't end with his heroic swim? It grows stranger, eerier, as new clues emerge not from the ocean, but from mysterious phone calls to his family and the boat's owner calls that made Georgia's coastal community question if Billy Joe and the others were truly gone. To understand why the Nesmiths clung to hope and why this remains a mystery over 30 years later, we must delve into Nathan's sighting of the freighter and what followed, clues so strange, almost supernatural, that turned this disappearance into an unsolvable puzzle. On the morning of April 13th, Nathan, exhausted and hypothermic, was barely alive. But the smoke on the horizon gave him a surge of adrenaline. The freighter, huge with a smoking stack, was in the area where he believed Billy Joe, his nephew, and their friend floated on debris. He watched breathless as it made slow circles as if searching. Hours later, it stopped lowering what looked like a lifeboat. "They're saving Billy." Nathan thought, tears streaming down his sunburned face. He believed his brother, for whom he'd sacrificed everything, was safe. But joy faded. The freighter, after its odd rescue, moved not toward Nathan. He watched it pass miles away, then vanish. Desperate, he shouted and waved, but his voice was weak, his body spent. He collapsed, head on the cold wreckage, closing his eyes, thinking at least Billy Joe was safe. He was wrong. The freighter, as we'll see, left no trace, becoming the heart of this mystery, a ghost no one could prove existed. 3 days later, on April 16th, another ship, not the freighter, found Nathan half dead and brought him to shore. In the hospital, his first question wasn't about himself. "Where's Billy?" he asked, voice faint but hopeful. "What about the others? Why didn't that freighter save me?" The response broke him. What freighter, Nathan, his family asked, confused. Per the Coast Guard, no freighter was in the area. No reports, no signals, no evidence. The ship with its smoke and lifeboat seemed to exist only in Nathan's mind. But the story didn't end. 5 months later, on October 5th, 1990, a chilling event revived the Nesmiths' hope and deepened the mystery. At Sarah Nesmith's home, the phone rang. Nathan's mother there answered and froze. A voice speaking rapid Spanish came through. She didn't understand, thinking it was a wrong number. But then, amid the rush, she heard Sarah's name and their phone number repeated in clear English. "Sarah Nesmith, 912-555-1234. The voice looped like a stuck tape, then hung up before she could respond. Minutes later, a similar call hit John Dawson, the boat's owner nearby. Rapid Spanish, then his name and number, John Dawson. 912-555-6789. It cut off abruptly. 2 near-identical calls targeting those tied to the disappearance couldn't be coincidence. But who sent them? Why these weren't isolated? Every few weeks, phones rang at Sarah's, or Dawson's, repeating names and numbers, then disconnecting. The Nesmiths and Dawson, initially baffled, realized these could be key to finding Billy Joe. They alerted police, restarting the search, with the Coast Guard contacting Spanish-speaking countries like Mexico to check for ships. Nothing. No records, no traces. Then, on March 6, 1991, a final call came to Sarah's home. The voice, starting in Spanish, switched to perfect English, saying, "Only I'm bringing him home." The line went dead. Sarah screamed, calling police, her heart pounding with hope and fear. Who was him, Billy Joe, the nephew? And who was calling, promising a return that never came? After that silence, no more calls, no more clues. These clues, the freighter and calls, open new theories, each a dead end. Was the freighter Nathan's hallucination? But why so vivid? Was it a real rescue unreported, due to illegal activity with calls from a guilty crew member? Or were the men kidnapped, the calls part of a failed extortion? A supernatural theory suggests the freighter was a phantom, the calls messages from beyond. Or was a larger conspiracy at play with calls as a failed leak? I can't shake the feeling the freighter was real tied to the calls. An illegal ship smuggling, perhaps, explains no records. The calls, so specific, feel like a desperate message, maybe from Billy Joe or someone who knew the truth. But why did they stop? Why was no one brought home? Those calls weren't just clues, they were the flame keeping the Nesmiths fighting. But their response in the communities showed hope's power in darkness, which we'll explore next. In a small coastal Georgia home, where sea breezes carried salt and memories, Nathan Nesmith's mother sat by an old phone, her hands trembling each time it rang. After the mysterious call on October 5th, 1990, when a Spanish-speaking voice repeated her daughter Sarah's name and number, the phone became a fragile link to Billy Joe, the son she refused to believe was gone forever. Each ring was a spark of hope, but also a knife to her heart, reminding her that Billy Joe, his nephew, and their friend hadn't returned. When the final call came on March 6, 1991, with the haunting promise, "I'm bringing him home," the house erupted in a mix of hope and fear. Sarah screamed, calling police, her heart racing with the thought her brother might still be alive. But when the calls stopped and no one appeared, the Nesmiths faced a painful question. Should they keep hoping or accept the ocean had taken their loved ones forever? The mysterious calls weren't just clues. They were the fire keeping the Nesmiths upright amid a storm of grief after the April 1990 disappearance. They weren't alone. Georgia's coastal community with weathered fishermen and sea-bound families shared their pain, joined the search, and grappled with questions the freighter and calls left behind. To understand why this story echoes over 3 decades later, we must look at how the Nesmiths fought to hold on to hope, how the community responded, and how Southern culture, with its belief in omens and the ocean's mysteries, turned this into a haunting local legend. The Nesmith family became the heart of this tragedy. Nathan, the sole survivor, carried an unhealing wound. Waking in the hospital on April 16, 1990, he hoped to hear Billy Joe and the others were saved by the freighter he saw. But his family's question, what freighter? Nathan hit like a punch. He wept not just for the loss, but for guilt. He'd swum 3 miles to save his brother, but Billy Joe was gone, and his freighter story was doubted as a hallucination. Nathan, a giant with a tender heart, grew quieter. He spent hours recounting the freighter's details, smoked slow circles of lifeboat to his family, as if repeating it would make it real. "I know what I saw," he said, voice firm but pained. It wasn't a hallucination. Nathan's mother, strong but worn by grief, was the family's anchor. She answered the first call, the Spanish voice repeating Sarah's name, stunning her. She didn't understand the words, but felt something profound, as if Billy Joe was reaching out. She logged every call, scribbling dates, words, and her feelings. I heard desperation in that voice. She told police, eyes teary. Sarah, Nathan's sister, was action-driven, contacting police, pushing searches and clinging to, "I'm bringing him home," like a lifeline. "If someone's trying to bring Billy back, we have to help," she told her family, voice trembling but resolute. The Nesmiths didn't just wait. They worked with police and the Coast Guard, sharing call details, and teamed with John Dawson, the boat's owner, who got similar calls. Together, they spurred a new search, hoping the calls meant Billy Joe was alive, perhaps on a foreign ship or in a distant country. But each empty-handed Coast Guard returned each checked ship record with no results, chipped away at their hope. Still, they refused to give up. "Billy Joe's a fighter," Nathan's mother said at a family meeting, voice steady. "If my boy's alive, he'll find a way home." Georgia's coastal community, though small, was swept into the story. Fishing was its lifeblood, and every fisherman knew the sea could give or take everything. As news spread, neighbors, friends, and strangers helped. They held beachside prayer vigils, lit candles under starry skies, and shared stories of their own brushes with the sea's wrath. Some fishermen volunteered to search, knowing the odds were slim. When the mysterious calls surfaced, whispers grew. Maybe they were taken by a foreign ship, an old fisherman said at a local diner, voice wary. Or maybe it's a ghost ship. These rumors, though baseless, reflected Southern culture where omens and the supernatural linger in minds. Georgia's culture, especially in coastal towns, is steeped in sea tales, ships, vanishing fishermen's souls, lost omens from the deep. The Spanish calls, with their eerie repetition and final promise, were seen by some as signs. Some believed they were Billy Joe's spirit reaching from beyond. Others, more practical, suspected an illegal ship smugglers or pirates, and the calls as failed extortion. Either way, the calls turned the Nesmith story into a local legend told on windy nights when the sea seemed to whisper secrets. Media, though not detailed in records, likely played a role. In 1990, Georgia papers probably ran headlines like "3 Fishermen Vanish Off Coast" or "Survivor Tells of Mystery Ship." The calls, when revealed, would have drawn more attention, perhaps on radio or evening news. Today, this would be a YouTube true crime hit, with videos dissecting the calls and freighter drawing millions of American viewers. Back then, local media kept the story alive, though it couldn't provide answers. The lasting impact went beyond the Nesmiths. It heightened fears about sea safety, prompting Georgia fishermen to check rented boats and life-saving gear more closely. The calls reinforced belief in the unexplained, with some locals holding annual memorials, floating flowers on the sea for Billy Joe and the others. The story became a cautionary tale about the ocean's power, not just a provider, but a void, hiding secrets beyond human reach. Reconsidering theories, maybe Billy Joe and the others drowned the calls, a cruel prank or mistake. But their precision targeting the Nesmiths in Dawson makes this unlikely. Perhaps they were rescued by a smuggler ship that didn't report the calls from a guilty crew member stopped short. Or scarier, they were kidnapped, the calls part of a failed extortion. A supernatural view sees the calls as spirit messages comforting the family. Or a larger conspiracy hid the truth, the calls of failed leak. I believe the calls weren't random. They're too specific, too tied to the disappearance to be coincidence. Billy Joe and the others may have been rescued or taken by a foreign ship, and someone, perhaps a guilty crew member, tried to reach the family. But a greater force, maybe the ship's operators, stopped it, leaving the Nesmiths in darkness. This story reflects an American fear vanishing without a trace, the truth buried by untouchable forces. Though the Nesmiths in Georgia's community never gave up, this mystery leaves unanswered questions, making us wonder, where is the truth? Will the ocean ever reveal its secrets? Despite the Nesmith family and Georgia's coastal community fighting tirelessly for answers, the mystery of Billy Joe and the 2 fishermen's fate remains silent but haunting, like a ghost ship adrift in the ocean. Over 3 decades have passed since April 12, 1990, when their fishing boats sank off Georgia, leaving Nathan Nesmith clinging to wreckage and an unanswered question. What happened to his brother, nephew, and friend? Was the freighter Nathan saw with its thin smoke and slow circles real, or a hallucination of a man near death? And the mysterious calls repeating the family's names and numbers, ending with the promise, "I'm bringing him home." Where did they come from as we stand at this story's end? There are no clear answers, only scattered pieces of a larger puzzle, and a sense that the ocean still hides a truth we may never reach. Let's recap this painful, strange journey. On the early morning of April 12, 1990, a 7-day fishing trip turned nightmarish when Billy Joe Nesmith's boat began sinking. The engine failed, water flooded in, and Billy Joe's mayday calls vanished into silence, unheard. Nathan, the devoted older brother, woke Billy Joe, and with the nephew and friend, they tried to save the boat but failed. As darkness enveloped them and the engine died, they abandoned ship clinging to an inflatable life raft, only to find it leaking after 30 minutes. The four men, now floating in freezing water, held onto a piece of wreckage facing death by hypothermia. In that desperate moment, Nathan made a sacrificial choice. He swam 3 miles through the ocean to give Billy Joe and the others a chance and act heroic, but nearly suicidal. Miraculously, Nathan survived, clinging to the wreck for 3 days until rescued. But his hope shattered when he learned Billy Joe, his nephew and their friend were missing, and the freighter he believed saved them didn't exist, at least per Coast Guard records. No reports, no witnesses, no evidence of a freighter. Nathan, though exhausted and hypothermic, insisted he saw it clearly, smoke circles a lifeboat lowered. But if the ship wasn't real, what did he see? And if it was, why didn't it save him? And what happened to Billy Joe? The strangest, eeriest clue came 5 months later, on October 5th, 1990. Phone calls, rapid in Spanish, began hitting Sarah Nesmith's home and John Dawson's, the boat's owner. Each repeated their names and numbers like a coded message, then hung up. Every few weeks, the phones rang, bringing hope and fear. Then on March 6th, 1991, a final call came, the voice switching to perfect English. "I'm bringing him home." Sarah screamed, calling police, believing Billy Joe was alive. But then silence. No more calls, no more clues, and no one came home. The Nesmiths, though broken, never gave up. Nathan's mother logged each call, seeking meaning in words she didn't understand. Sarah pushed searches, clinging to "I'm bringing him home" like a lifeline. Nathan burdened as the survivor was haunted by the freighter, retelling his story to keep Billy Joe alive in memory. Georgia's coastal community, steeped in fishing culture and omens, was swept in. They lit candles, searched the seas, and whispered of ghost ships or conspiracies. Despite efforts, the Coast Guard found no trace of Billy Joe, the nephew, or the friend. No wreckage, no bodies, no freighter. The search ended, the three presumed dead, but the Nesmiths refused to accept it. This story leaves questions, each like a wave crashing, reminding us of what's lost. Was Nathan's freighter real or a hallucination? If real, why no records? And what did it do with Billy Joe? Who sent the calls with their eerie repetition and final promise? A guilty crew member, an extortionist, or something supernatural? And why did they stop, leaving the Nesmiths in painful silence? These questions haunt not just the family, they tap a deep fear vanishing without a trace, the truth buried in the ocean's depths. Final theories. Maybe Billy Joe and the others drowned the calls, a cruel prank. But their precision makes this unlikely. Perhaps a smuggler's ship rescued them, unreported the calls from someone, stopped short. Or scarier, they were kidnapped, the calls part of failed extortion. A supernatural view sees the calls as spirit messages, or a conspiracy hid the truth, the calls of failed leak. I'm haunted by the thought the freighter was real, and Billy Joe and the others were rescued or taken by an outlaw ship. The calls, so specific, feel like a desperate signal, perhaps, from Billy Joe or someone who knew. But a greater force, maybe the ship's operators, silenced it, leaving the Nesmiths in darkness. This isn't just a disappearance. It's a reminder of human powerlessness against the ocean, a place where even today, we can't fully grasp its secrets. It taps an American fear, disappearing without a trace, the truth out of reach. The impact stretched beyond the Nesmiths. It heightened sea safety fears, with Georgia fishermen checking boats and gear closely. The calls fueled belief in the unexplained, with locals holding memorials, floating flowers for Billy Joe and the others. The Nesmiths, never giving up, lived with unclosed pain, holding vigils, hoping for Billy Joe's return as promised. Nathan, the reluctant hero, carried the freighter's memory as both burden and flame, living for his brother. Reflecting, I wonder, Is the truth out there, hidden by waves and time? Maybe Billy Joe is gone, but the calls make me believe there's a bigger story, a secret the ocean keeps. That's what makes this story, though tragic, so gripping. It reminds us some mysteries lie not in what we find, but in what we'll never know. What do you think? Was the freighter real or a mirage? Who made those calls and why did they stop? Share your theories in the comments. I'd love to hear them. If you enjoy strange, dark, mysterious stories like this, follow for more episodes diving into puzzles that linger. Perhaps out there in the ocean, the truth awaits someone brave enough to find it.